Just your standard literary diversions video with a slight locational twist. And welcome back to another video. Although not welcome back to my library. Oh, hello. Will you be joining us for this filming session? Oh, beautiful. Just how would I film this without kisses? I'm blessed. How does your mum do this? Surely she doesn't shut you out because you're too cute. You're too cute. Oh, thank you. Cool. Wonder if setting spray holds up to breeze. So where was I? Oh yes, we appear to be somewhere new. And as our little furry visitor suggests, the new place that we are is Becca's library. I am sure you guys are very familiar with the lovely Becca from Becca and the Books, who is not only allowing me to borrow her library for the next few videos, but is also letting me borrow her pooch. And Hamilton, who is slightly more elusive and camera shy. And if you are anything like me, then being left alone in one of your besties' libraries only means opportunities. There are many books in here that I own because Becca and I's Venn diagram is actually quite healthy. However, though Becca and I are both fantasy freaks, like, you know, the whole like who's gonna match my freak, we match, but just glancing around Becca's library I can tell that some of the epic and classic fantasy especially that Becca owns I do not. And so I thought that what we would do here today, you and me, left alone essentially in the TV, because let me tell you, no matter how long I've been on BookTube, anytime I step into a BookTube bestie's house it's like walking into the TV, that we could attempt a little try a first chapter video. It has been a hell of a long time since I did one of those on this channel, and what better time? And by better time I mean when I have no time pressure, because I'm here for days. So let's get choosing, shall we? See, in the TV. Okay, so from what I can see, Becca's library has a few very select different kinds of nooks. Over in the corner here, mostly we have her favourites. There's Sarah J Maas, Brandy Sandy, Robin Hobb, you know, all of the familiar hits. Over in this corner we have some classics and some manga, and we do also have a Bree, don't drink my water! Good girl! What was I saying? Oh yes, we also have a fair few hardback and special editions of fantasy, and of course the infamous stacks. In this lovely little bookcase, which I'm not gonna lie, I kind of want to kidnap and take home, we predominantly have hardback fantasy and fantasy series, and then of course there are the infamous paperback shelves. Now Becca alphabetizes her paperback collection, so this isn't all fantasy. In fact, a few of these I spot in here were me. I am definitely responsible for putting the dry on her shelves, but these are going to be the main shelves that I am pulling from for this video, because this is where a bunch of the classic fantasy lives. First up, an absolute no-brainer for me, as in I saw it and my entire body went towards it like a homing pigeon. We have The Demon King by Cinda Williams Chima. And I guess this is the point in the video where I should probably say that although Becca and I have a lot of the same fantasy and sci-fi tastes, in saying that there is a lot of things that are not. For example, Becca is an absolute stan for The Final Strife by Sarah L. Arifi, which, as we both know, I recently DNF'd. And we are also very clear on the fact that although I have nothing against it, I'm definitely not on the Brandy Sandy train. So when it comes to some of the books I'm going to be pulling today, like this one, I'm fairly confident that Becca also hasn't read them, that these are TBR possibilities for her. But I'm going to wait till the end after I have picked my 5 books to try a chapter from to confirm whether she has or has not read them, because I think that would be more fun than going on recommendations. Now next up is an interesting one, because it is a series that I did used to have on my shelves way back in the day. We're talking OG Leanne's library here, when I was originally into Robin Hobb and I didn't even know that BookTube existed. And I had this series on my shelves for so long that without me even touching them, the books had completely faded in the same way that they had faded from my memory. And so I ended up unhauling them unread. Stretch and grow! That series is the Magician's Guild series by Trudy Caravan. This is Trudy Caravan's debut series, and I know that she's written more in this world after it, but I don't know if she's written any other world. Like, I actually have no idea if there are other series that exist out there from Trudy Caravan. But either way, this is one of those series that I kind of hold a little bit of guilt about. Not a huge amount, because you guys know I'm not into that life. If I don't want it, I don't want it and it leaves. But this is one of the ones that I'm like, And though I now have heard a few things about it that are less than favourable, I kind of feel like younger Leanne, who originally got into fantasy, would probably have loved this if she'd ever got round to it. Okay, so I thought I would get that one before I told you about it because it involved a lot of bending. And like my bookshelves, Becca's are tight. They are packed. The books are going nowhere. So the next one that I have is The Black Prism by Brent Weeks. Brent Weeks is one of those fantasy authors. Pretty much everybody will be able to recognise his covers even if you haven't read his books and even if you don't know what they're about. I have at home The Way of Shadows on my shelf because I think that that is his debut series. If I remember correctly, when I was deciding which one to buy, that was the one that I went for. But since then, as often happens, most people have recommended me that I start with this one, which is really freaking annoying because your girl likes to read authors in order if she can. Like if they've written a lot of fantasy, a lot of series, I like to kind of start at the beginning. Often, you know, the writing gets better with time and you can be nostalgic about the earlier books. But in this case, not so much. Next up, we're going for a bit of a mystery pick for me. This is a book and an author that I have seen a lot, but I have literally never looked into their books. I have no idea what they're about, and I don't even know if we're talking like upper YA or if we're actually firmly in the adult fantasy zone. And that book is right here. Oh damn, that one slid out really easy. This is The Novice by Tara Matheru. Not gonna lie, this cover was a complete surprise to me as much as it might have been to you. I'm guessing that you guys are a lot like me and you watch longer booktube videos while you're doing other things. And so occasionally I'll hear often an author's name mentioned, but I will have absolutely no like visual representation of what their books look like. I've only just briefly glanced at the back and I see orphan training as a blacksmith's apprentice and I approve. And then finally, I've been wrestling with myself about choosing this particular book, like arguing whether it's actually in the spirit of this challenge or not. The last book that I think I'm going to pick for this video is Shaman's Crossing by Robin Hobb. Now this one is a bit of a cheat because I definitely know that Becca has not read this one, and you guys know by this point in the year that I am hosting the Fits Along, which is a complete read through of all of the Realm of the Elderlings books because I am a massive Robin Hobb stan. For some reason, despite loving Hobb as much as I do, I have never tried out this trilogy, which is completely separate from the Realm of the Elderlings, and I've actually never read anything except for a couple of short stories that she's written under the name Megan Lindholm. Are you coming to check on me? Have I been in here for a long time? I'm sorry. So yeah, I'm gonna slightly cheat. I'm gonna pick this one. I'm gonna sample it. There's a good chance I'm gonna love it. It is pretty much my only guaranteed win out of this video, so leave me alone, okay? Let me hobble in peace. Okay, so the first book that I tried is The Demon King. This was originally written in 2010, and the gentlest thing I think I can say is that it shows. It's not in any way a bad opening to a book, but it also has a lot of the tropes that I would really expect to find in 2010's fantasy. So this book is about Han Alistair. From the blurb, we don't really get much of a hint as to his age, but from the first chapter I would say he's probably sitting about 17 or 18, which is quite typical for a fantasy book like this, which isn't quite chosen one but is definitely definitely going to have a more of an epic scope. You can already feel it. Han comes from a very poor family, and he and his friend Dancer are in the mountains searching for mushrooms, which appealed to me right off the bat, which they are going to trade or sell in the market for meat and grain, etc., to feed their families. There's already been a fairly big mention of Han's family right in the beginning of the first chapter. It feels like a very, very traditional poor family. We're starving, we're living hand to mouth, we are the peasants of Peasantville, because the thing that Han's mum's really annoyed about right at the beginning of this book is that he traded quite a rare and exotic mushroom for a pair of fancy boots. And that interaction between him and his mum is amusing, but also kind of quite telling. It doesn't feel like he's particularly attached to his family at this point. It feels like he's kind of feeling quite picked on and put upon, which definitely shows in the banter between him and his friend Dancer, which is actually my favourite part of this chapter. I really like their interactions, and I just kind of wish that it was actually a book about them. You know, sort of the way at the start of the Hunger Games where you just kind of wish that it's just going to be a book about Katniss and Gale, regardless of which team you end up being on. I kind of feel like that about the start of this one. But while they are in the mountains, they happen upon a group of young wizards who are using an amulet to start a fire. The mountains that they are setting a fire in are not only sacred mountains, but Han and Dancer also know the kind of devastation that a fire like that could cause, and so they intervene, and they end up walking away with said amulet, which they really shouldn't have. I understand from the blurb that said amulet actually is powerful and rare and impressive because it once belonged to the Demon King. Now, what I haven't got to yet, and I think is probably coming in the second chapter, is Raisa, I think. She is a princess, she is heir to the Fells, which includes the mountains that the young wizards were trying to set on fire. She has recently just returned home after spending several years with some clans in the mountains, learning things that will enable her to be a better princess and serve her people well. And evidently, going by the bottom of this blurb, Han and Raisa are going to bump into each other, and no doubt we know where that's eventually going to go by the end of the trilogy. Now, I say these things like quite derisively, but I don't actually mean them like that. Those are like good solid fantasy tropes that I really genuinely enjoy, and I think that if I picked this one up, it would be a really fast read. And while there would definitely be some eye-rolly portions, I'm sure I also think that I would probably really enjoy it. I'm not entirely sold on it. I think I would need to read more than the first chapter to decide if I wanted to go there, because it could feel really nostalgic and really fun, or it could just end up feeling really cheesy and played out. So the first line in this one is, Han Alistair squatted next to the steaming mud spring, praying that the thermal crust would hold his weight. Interesting first sentence, but again, not in love with it. So yeah, 3 stars for the first chapter. This one is following Sania. She is the urchiniest of street urchins. Again, she comes from a very poor family, and she has a lot, and I mean a lot, of bitterness for the world around her, which is one of the things that I don't like the most about this first chapter, because I can just see where it's going. She really feels like a younger character who Trudy Caravan has kind of written the author's voice into. I don't feel like I'm reading an authentic younger character. I feel like I'm reading an adult's point of view, but conveniently written as a child. Sometimes that can be pulled off well. You guys know that I like thrillers that feature creepy children, which are very much written for an adult audience, but they still feel like children, and Sania doesn't feel like she is the age that she is supposed to be in this first chapter. So in the middle of this, we are in a crowd of people watching a procession of wizards go down a street. And through a lot of different circumstances, because this is actually quite a long and convoluted first chapter. I mean, to be fair, lengthwise it's only 19 pages, but it definitely felt like more than that, because we follow Sania through this crowd and we bump into another group of kids, and we see kind of some of this procession, which is part of a thing called the Purge in this world, through her eyes. And the point of it essentially is that she throws a stone at one of the wizards, but instead of it bouncing off of the sort of energy field barrier that they have around the wizards to protect them from this kind of thing, it actually passes right through and knocks the wizard out, which is completely unheard of. The only person in this world who could have done that is another wizard, which is how this little street urchin gets plucked out of nowhere and sent to the prestigious academy to learn magic. I actually quite like the hook of that. I like the way that it's done because, again, kid being pulled out of the middle of nowhere and sent to big magical university with like smart magical people from rich families is also not a unique trope in fantasy, but it is one that I absolutely love. I love a magic school or university trope, so I like the way that it was set up, but I don't like the writing. The only time that we get any kind of emotive stuff in that first chapter is bitterness and rage, which of course you would feel in her position, but I kind of just don't want to start off a book that way, you know? I want to start off a book getting to know the character and being invested in the character before they start to tell me how angry they are about their life, so I can also be righteously indignant with them. So yeah, I'm gonna give this one a kind of generous 2 for the first chapter, even though it has an absolute masterful first sentence that it absolutely does not live up to. The first sentence is, "It is said in Imogen that the wind has a soul and that it wails through the narrow streets because it is grieved by what it finds there." Like, that is a genius first line, but where is that writing in the rest of it? The next one that I tried was the Black Prism, and you can probably tell from my face that I am super excited by this one. I absolutely loved this. I am now so excited to try The Way of Shadows because my current rules about buying books are that if I have anything from that author on my shelves, I have to read that first, which I am a little bit gutted about because man, do I want to pick this one up instead. This is also a really clever first chapter as compared to the blurb, because all the blurb says in these 2 tiny little paragraphs is that Gael is the prism, the most powerful man in the world, but prisms never last for very long, and so when he discovers that he has a son born in a far off land after the war that got him the job that he now has, he decides that he has to find him pretty much immediately, and then he has to keep him safe because that is a secret that could definitely get both of them killed, which is extremely interesting to me because I am assuming that the first chapter, which starts with a kid named Kit, is following that child, which I just think is a really interesting hook. From this blurb, I had absolutely no idea where I was going in this book, unlike the other 2, which essentially served me exactly what it promised in the blurb, exactly the same setup, and actually gave me possibly more information than I actually needed. However, as we know, the blurb is not really the fault of the author, the blurb is the fault of the publisher, but Orbit did real well with this one. So as I said, the first chapter follows Kip, and he is crawling in complete darkness at night in secret through an empty battlefield. And at first when you're reading it, you're like, oh, you're crawling towards a battle, are you nuts? But actually he's crawling towards an old battlefield, because this is where one of the battles that is mentioned on the back of the book that put the prism into power was fought, and now years and years later treasures are starting to come up through the mud as plants have been taking over, the roots have been unsettling things, and so what Kip is hoping to find is something very special that he can sell. Again, from the sounds of this one, Kip is a poor kid, very much on the bottom of the pecking order in this world. However, what I particularly liked about the introduction to this one was that Kip was saying one of his friends thought he was nuts for doing this, but that friend didn't have to feed his family because his mother didn't smoke his wages. So clearly a very different sort of obligation that Kip has at the beginning of this to his mother. It's not just a poor starving family where he's expected that he has to do stuff. He has to do stuff because his family is not in a great situation. So I loved that because it suggested that there wasn't just depression and grief all over this world, that there were actual possibilities for joy, it's just that Kip isn't allowed them. And the actual writing in this is just, oh, it's so good. It hooked me in right from the beginning, and it's kind of funny in a very subtle way. Kip keeps finding reasons why he might die in this endeavour, including the fact that there are wolves and there are ghosts, but it's okay because the wolves are afraid of the ghosts, so maybe they'll cancel each other out. It's just that kind of like subtle humour which, although we're in a dire situation, you do still want to keep reading because you do still care about what happens to Kip. So hooray, a character that I immediately cared about right off the bat. I should point out, by the way, that all of this was achieved in 12 pages. Unlike this one, which took 20 to bore me and tell me nothing. And this one started out with the sentence, Kip crawled towards the battlefield in the darkness, the mist pressing down, blotting out sound, scattering starlight. And I would say that that is a very good representation of the writing later on in that chapter. So this one, for the sheer intrigue that it gave me, the amount of excitement, I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 5. I want to read it now. Okay, next up we have got The Novice, and this one was also not for me. Any of you guys who recognise this book were probably shouting that into the screen before I told you anything about it. This one is in fact YA, and YA fantasy is just not something that I pick up anymore. Very occasionally I will get one sold to me by somebody who's like really enthusiastic, and it works for me because again it's a personal recommendation. But this one I don't think would have even got through a personal recommendation. This one I think would have been a straight up pass from me, regardless of who told me to read it once I knew more about it. So not only is this a YA fantasy, but it is a 2015 YA fantasy, and I feel like the 2000 to 2018 section of YA fantasy is a very particular flavour, and it's not a flavour that does it for me. On the back of the book it says, Fletcher is an orphan training as a blacksmith's apprentice when he discovers he has the rare ability to summon demons from another world. And I think genuinely if I had read on from that first sentence that I spotted when I was up there, I probably would have clued myself in. So for this one I would say it's not necessarily the book, it's more just me. The entire first chapter is about our main character trying to hunt an elk, hunting the elk, bringing the elk home because once again he's starving and poor, and on the way home struggling to bring this elk back he bumps into one of the richer kids from town who's like, oh I'll help you, and then ends up taking the elk for himself and shutting him out of town. He actually uses the phrase you little worm, and I'm just like, it feels the most basic fantasy writing that could have existed in that chapter. And yet still that is not necessarily a complete barrier to me reading a book. Very basic writing can actually take me quite a long way. But unfortunately I wasn't sold on either of the characters that we met in that first chapter. They felt very caricature-y, they felt very like later on I was going to see them in a variety of situations that I can already predict and I'm already not interested in. And I think that is kind of reflected in the first sentence of this because it literally starts, it was now or never, which like, okay girl, sure. I'm gonna give this one again a generous 2 because if I was rating it as harshly as I felt about it when I was reading it I would probably have rated it a 1, and I will definitely not be carrying on with this one. And then finally of course we have Shaman's Crossing by Robin Hobb. So I did know a little bit about this series when I picked it off the shelf, but not very much. This is book 1 of the Soldier Son trilogy, which is an isolated trilogy for Robin Hobb. Like I said, it's not part of the realm of the Elderlings. It is a side quest if you will. It was also originally published in 2005, and the only thing that I know about this one is that people have said that the writing is actually quite different from the writing in Realm of the Elderlings, and now having read the first chapter I can confirm that that's true, because although in the first chapter of this one we meet a character who could be said to be the equivalent of Fitz in that he is a young boy sort of learning about the world around him. I'm not saying any of their actual circumstances are the same, but like the same sort of age, the same sort of mental age. This character feels nothing like Fitz, and in fact I actually kind of dislike him a little bit just based on the first chapter. But that's not unlike in the last book or in the Trudy Caravan book a reason that I will not be continuing on with this, because I know 100% that Robin Hobb can sell you very purposefully on a character being a little bit trash, being quite unlikable, being problematic even, and then do a massive 180 with you later on in the book and possibly continue to rotate all throughout the series. So I have faith based on that. But I also think even if I didn't know anything about Robin Hobb, I would still have continued on with this one, because Robin Hobb's writing, regardless of what series she's writing or what tone she has, seems to be very much the same in that it is very beautiful, it is very involving, it leaves you with a lot of questions wanting to go on and try and find all of the answers, but it also leaves you with the suggestion that there's maybe stuff in this world that you're never going to get an answer to, and I kind of love that too. It's the kind of writing where I'm not surprised that I've said so much about it without telling you anything about what this book is about, because that is how involved it makes you. So this one is about Navari. He is a soldier's son and he is planning on going to the military academy, and then he will head to the frontier from there, serve his time and find a good marriage. What I do find very interesting is that on the back of this one it then says that the army has pushed the frontiers back as far as they physically can, as far as the Barrier Mountains, which is home to the enigmatic Spec people. It then goes on to say they are exotic and misunderstood and are believed to spread a sexual plague which has ravaged the frontier, decimating entire regiments. I have questions. Is this a case that soldiers are thirsty and can't keep it in their pants and we've sent some people to take care of them in a nice gentle way? Either way, I want to find out. The first chapter of this one, unsurprisingly for Robin Hobb, is 26 pages long, and actually a lot happens in this first chapter. And it's stuff that I don't really want to spoil for you because it kind of sets the tone for following the character into the next chapter. I hope that's vague enough. For those Realm of the Elderlings nuts out there, would I say that it is as good as the start of Assassin's Apprentice? No. However, I would suggest to you that nothing is going to be as good as the start of Assassin's Apprentice because we all love it so much. Funnily enough, I actually think I would give this one a 3.5 if I was rating it just based on the first chapter. And the first chapter begins with the sentence, "I remember well the first time I saw the magic of the Plains people." So lots in there to chew on and think on, and I do think eventually I will pick this trilogy up. Maybe at the end of the Fits Along. Maybe I'll just continue on with this and then finally read all of the other books that she's published under Megan Lindholm. We shall see. So where does that leave us at the end of this stack? If this was a shopping Becca's shelves, if I was heading home with any of these, I think I would definitely obviously keep Shaman's Crossing because Robin Hobb, yeah. And I definitely would also keep The Demon King because I was very entertained and wanted to know more. The Novice would definitely be going back to the stacks, that's a no from me, along with The Magician's Guild, and I don't think I would sample anything more from either of these two authors just based on the start of these books. But of course the absolute enthusiastic winner of this one is the Brent Weeks. I would 100% be walking away with the Black Prism, and I'm gonna have to really stop myself from placing an order because apart from anything else, this is a very long book and it's the start of a series, and that's not the place I want to be putting myself in the second half of 2024. So on that extremely confused note, that is it, my friends, for the first of what I hope is many videos that I'm about to film abusing Becca's library. If you got this far through the video, then leave me a horse emoji down below because I think it would be hard to find a Black Prism one. If you have read and enjoyed any of the series that I've talked about here today, please tell me about that down below. Or if you have loved any of the books that I have just poo-pooed here, then please tell me about that down below. Opinions and enthusiastic discourse are encouraged here. If you are new to my channel and you would like to see whether my resolve holds out and whether I don't buy the Black Prism this year, then please hit that subscribe button. And if you are a returning subscriber who predicted some of my opinions on these and knows that I'm trash and I'm probably going to buy this book anyway, then please hit that like button because it really helps my channel. And I will speak to all of you guys very soon. Bye!